Oh yeah, you can hear it. Well, hello everybody, and welcome to this week's Metaworld News, where we bring you news from virtual reality technology where relevant, but basically social virtual worlds. And this week's headlines coming up are for, let me see, I've got to check the date, haven't I? But this is the week ending the 20th of August 2017, for those of you who want to be very particular about it. Right, my name is Mal Burns. You can follow me on Twitter at twitter.com/malburns, or one word, MALBURNS. And if you miss any of the things I'm about to read out, you will find links to the articles and various things via that feed. I'm just choosing various highlights to read out now. And this is rather a sort of general feed about the world of VR interfacing and stuff. Starting last week, I may have put this in last week's news, the Firefox web browser has had a virtual reality update and has now added web VR support into their browser, which I think that probably means there are very few browsers left that don't have web VR support built into them properly anymore, although the one I use, Opera, seems to be a bit behind. Right, so moving into the week, the news about Firefox came from geeky-gadgets.com in my case, and there's also a piece from this time last week from NBC News about these new gadgets could be game changers for senior living, but I think we included that last week. So moving to the beginning of the week, post at medium.com by Alice Bonacio. Rather useful. It's basically infographic VR for beginners, and that really is just what it is. For those of you that like looking at those long vertical graphic displays that show you histories and methodologies and stuff like that, she's done a VR for beginners. UploadVR on oneword.com have reported that targeted by the Trump travel ban, a musician reaches Americans in VR. This is Ash Kusha, who's a London-based sort of world musician, but he's also a self-described virtual reality pioneer, rock star, and synesthete. Who sees colors as sound, but basically he can't get to America under the current Führer, and therefore has to rely on virtual reality to reach his American audience. But that's a good example of what virtual reality is all about, despite the sad fact that he can't get to America. Right. Impossible in Real Life, complete VR exhibition of Van Gogh's Sunflowers. This post you will find at uploadvr.com. And I did mention this week because some of the Van Gogh paintings, I know that Tate Modern is part of this in Britain, and that's how I announced it last week. But apparently the whole thing's a bit greater. Each one of the 5 sunflower paintings by Vincent van Gogh is actually all hang in different galleries in different museums scattered all over the planet. And the actual complete VR exhibit that you can see at various locations actually uses VR to literally break down the geography and bring all the exhibits together, despite despite the fact that the real paintings are sort of hanging in different locations. So interesting that. Number 567 of voicesofvr.com. That's all one word, voicesofvr.com. Interview with somebody called Dr. Marilyn Schlitz, social anthropologist, consciousness researcher and co-author of various books. And she's talking about navigating paradox, reality bubbles, and multiple worldviews with VR. That's a handful, isn't it? So, I think the title tells you what you're in for. But interesting enough, although I didn't listen to all of it. Digital Trends has a post about NASA, the North American Space Agency, I guess they are. You will know NASA anyway. Their next spacecraft may launch from virtual and augmented realities. Believe it or not, they obviously astronauts have used virtual reality for a long time to preview the experience they're going to have when they get shot up in the air, and various other things. But apparently, the NASA is set to make their space science and engineering programs much more immersive, and even things like the launch process and stuff like that. A lot more will be done using augmented and virtual reality. So, read more about that at Digital Trends. VRScout.com covers a new app that lets you control Ableton live music software in VR. This is an interesting use of VR from the musical standpoint in the future. Ableton's desktop software is very popular for sampling music and mixing, and what musicians do when they're making music on computers. What the app does is unlike the desktop, the app creates a 3D environment and allows you to interface with your desktop music software using a 3D interface on the app. I'm certain you will need to have a licensed version of the Ableton desktop software to actually use the app that plugs into it, so to speak. But interesting sort of approach to creating music in a 360 environment. Also, Art Virtual, a company run by Keystone Bouchard, who used to be very active with the architecture wiki and stuff in Second Life, has been posting a whole series of videos. I've actually only linked to one in the feed at YouTube about enterprise VR development. It's a kind of showreel of what his company is doing, but I don't really consider it an advert because the company is doing so much and they are so dedicated to VR that there's everything from engineering to medicine to teaching, the whole gamut there. So it's a good little video to watch. Medium.com, always a place for good reads as well as so reads. After a 23-year wait, web VR ships today. This is more about the fact Firefox now have web VR. It actually shipped 4 days ago, so the news earlier was a couple of days ahead of reality, so to speak. The post by Sean White at Medium.com is very much an inside look from inside the Firefox crew, so to speak, and talking about the title says it all. After a 23-year wait, we're here. The 23 years is, of course, referring to early VR experiments that were on the web in the past. Right. Digital Trends again has a post about Strider VR. That's STRIDER, as in taking a stride. Strider VR is a new omnidirectional treadmill for walking in virtual reality. Now, if you follow hardware for this kind of thing, you've probably seen treadmills before. This isn't actually the first, but they claim to have better technology and give you a better impression of free movement and stuff like that. So they have a sort of mini review and a roundup of Strider VR there. It's often complained that gamers, don't get enough exercise, and people who inhabit virtual reality worlds on their desktops or even in their headsets don't either. So there's these companies doing treadmills and exercise bikes and things that link to VR are actually making a big ploy, of the fact that they give you physical exercise too, which can't be a bad thing, really. Oh, if only I could cycle anymore. Right. Ready for virtual reality in-flight entertainment. Well, yeah, we have flight simulators, but now you can get virtual reality in a real aeroplane. Air France is testing new virtual reality headsets to improve the in-flight entertainment options. They want to get rid of the tiny screens and cheap headphones on the back of the seats facing you and replace them with presumably high-tech helmets. And you might even forget that you're out of your head on Valium in an airplane. I don't know. But apparently they figure that will be improvement to air travel, first class only, I presume, of course. Right. Now. Last week, the very sad news. Well, actually, I think it was the week before that we were discussing it on Inworld Review last week with Pathfinder. Old Space VR's passing was kind of sad, except, well, maybe we got it wrong. Social virtual reality startup Old Space VR may not be dead after all. This is a post 3 days ago at TechCrunch. And since then, there have been other posts here, there, and everywhere explaining that it's basically not going anywhere thanks to a new interest from third parties. I gather that Alt Space VR, the brand, is now no more, but Alt Space VR, the platform, is still running and may continue to do so. So their fans are kind of happy. TechCrunch have that article, and there are various other more recent ones. They may well be near the top of this list. VR Scout.com has a link to actually, this is not what the regular podcasts actually post, but it's a podcast basically talking about AR magazines, NFL refs in VR, and eye implants. So again, looking at the hardware that may or may not enable your virtual reality in the future. Two simultaneous posts. Both of these actually appeared at medium.com, but you can also now find them at blog.highfidelity.com. High Fidelity being spelled HIGHFIDELITY. blog.highfidelity.com. Both articles are written by Philip Rosedale, pertaining, well, not so much to High Fidelity itself, but their roadmap. One post is about protecting intellectual property in virtual worlds, and the other post is specifically about currency and content protection. Both posts are talking about the way they're going to be using the public blockchain, basically, for buying, selling digital goods and storing information. But the interesting thing is that Philip reveals that High Fidelity, if you look carefully, will release a new cryptocurrency. So instead of Bitcoin or all the other cryptocurrencies that are around, it seems that High Fidelity are going to start their own, which I think is rather interesting. Well, whether it just be limited to virtual world users or whether they've got aspirations outside, I don't know. But they're going to release their own cryptocurrency and also implement blockchain. Public blockchain for protecting rights and tracking inventories and things. Right, VRScout.com. How VR is changing the way we think about therapy. That was a post that came up this morning. Basically, the idea is the things you can do to for people, not two people, sorry. That sounds sinister. For people who need therapy that you can do with them in VR. Maybe more effectively than you can do by sitting them on the couch in a sterile-looking surgery or whatever they do. So how VR is changing the way we think about therapy at VRScout.com. And I think finally in this feed at least, voicesofvr.com. Again, number 569. The title is Merlio, this is a name, dash Ponti, basically. That's an author, Merlio Ponti. I can't read this darn thing. Sorry, folks. phenomenology of perception and embodied metaphors. I must say, as the weeks go by, voicesofvr.com comes up with some more challenging titles for me to read out as they get very much deeper into the spheres of virtual reality linked stuff. Anyway, that's it from my my Twitter feed. Now we do also have as Mal Bones, of course, I have posts and likes and stuff on Google+. You may be interested. There's a lot of open simulated news that tends to be there. But I'm going to switch to another feed we have for this show, which is twitter.com/Metaworld News, as in the name of this show. Modemworld.me. This is another page blog. Following the announcement of its closure, AltSpace VR is still open, and blah, blah, blah. Basically, she's got AltSpace VR The Return. Her blog is normally focused on Second Life, but she does, bring out a few articles that, particularly this week, way out of Second Life's field. She's done some looking at their new platform, Sansar, and she's also done a piece on high fidelity, revealing currency and IP protection roadmaps. So you can find all her posts, basically, at Modemworld. ME. That's a modem, as in the old thing that made a lot of noise when you connected to the internet by an old phone line. Get me? It's not modern world, it's modem world. MODEMWORLD.me. Right, I've already included the other high fidelity stuff. I thought this was rather funny. I'll jump ahead here to an anecdotal thing. There's no link to go with this particularly, but if you follow our Twitter feed, you'll see an entry for something called Space City, and that actually just provides a link to the HTML embed page for sine waves space platform, and that particular, you can get there in the main client, of course, but that's just taking advantage of their embeddable regions on the web. That was a post that I think it was probably Adam Frisby put up during the week. For those of you, maybe, certainly here in Britain, I'm sure many of you remember Jerry Anderson and all the puppet series, Thunderbirds, Stingray, Fireball, XL5, the stuff I grew up on, actually. Well, they've got a whole region there in sine wave, or science space as it's called now, dedicated to the work of Jerry Anderson. So that was a rather nice surprise. No link for this, but yesterday I took a sort of break from the normal metaverse and actually went over in the main client for Science Space, and they're actually having a big sort of weekend summer celebration, and that was actually pretty impressive. There were DJs, there were live performers, and there were kind of tours. And unlike some virtual venues where, you go to an expo grid or conference grid or something, this actually had you moving around all the while. One session would take place in one region, then you'd be shoveled off to another region for another session. Then while there was a changeover somewhere, then you'd spend an hour visiting some highlight regions that they sort of guided you to just to have a look at, no long safari, just pop in, have a look and see how wonderful they will look and what you can do, including I lost about 20 minutes of my time by actually going into a cellar and then falling through a trap into a cellar that was way below, and there was no way out. No, there was no way out. All I could do was go somewhere else and then come back. Right, so mean, very mean some of those places are, but never mind. That's half the fun of it, I suppose. Right, so great activities. Those do continue today, by the way. So if you Google sine wave, .space or whatever, you'll be able to find out how to get there on the web or download the client that you need to get the full experience and stuff. I know it started up about 3 hours ago and will be continuing for probably another 8 hours today. Right, so good old hypergridbusiness.com had a post from David Karuki a couple of days ago. OpenSim actives are down, but land areas up this month. Basically, those are Maria's kind of stats, although David seems to be doing them now. There was less actual activity and logins in OpenSim regions this month. Probably you got to remember in the northern hemisphere at least, where there are lots of grids, it is midsummer. And people do tend to be out enjoying that rather than the virtual experience. But the land area is actually up. So people taking land and launching grids and all that stuff on the Open Simulator platform has been growing even in the last month. Right, now the other big news as far as the metaverse is concerned is really the hypergrid, which joins the majority of Open Simulator worlds together, is really the only working example of a true metaverse we have at the moment. In other words, there can be grids here, there, and ever scattered around the planet, and jumping between them is as easy as jumping to a web page. That really is, in theory, what the metaverse is all about. And most OpenSim grids have something activated called the hypergrid, which is the method by which you jump. So there is a lot of dependency for the metaverse and the hypergrid by extension on Open Simulator's code. And it has been long awaited, but finally on Monday it was announced that the new series of Open Simulator code, which I think is 0.9.00, in other words, it's a landmark release. It's the first public release of a new platform code for some considerable time. There are changes, but they may not be as radical as some people were thinking. It doesn't look as if the new code will specifically break anything if you don't want it to. But it offers a lot of new features, which we will probably be discussing later today on the hour in the Inworld review to a certain extent. Basically, it appears to have halfway compatibility points. I won't go into details, but for example, if you want to run the latest version of OpenSim, you're not forced to use, you can still use bullet physics, for example, which even though they recommend you choose a new physics model, that's sort of deep tech stuff, so I won't go into it. But apparently there is a sort of a leeway in the way you can configure the new build to be more or lesser compatible with the older builds. Right. Hypergrid Business also had a post by somebody called Nuala Ada, who, if it's the same Nuala I'm thinking of, is an educator. But it was an odd post, which I've actually personally disagree with, saying educators sour on virtual worlds. As is often the case, they've sort of focused a lot on Second Life, which, given the expense of running anything in Second Life, it's not really surprising. Educators departed en masse some years ago. They can now get discounts again. They brought them back. But, a lot of educators have lost faith. What is less obvious from this article is the amount of educational activity that goes on here on OpenSim and on the hypergrid. Many educational sims in platforms, actually grids, are not actually hypergrid enabled because they might have school kids and things who they don't want wandering off during the time they're meant to be having lessons, or more often wandering off to, I don't know, adult nightclubs or something. So some of those do not appear readily on the hypergrid indexes. And I think it's a mistake to imply that educators, to any great extent, have soured on virtual worlds. They do make the point that educators face greater budget restraints and things like that these days. But again, it's quite easy for a school or a university to set up their own grid, whether it's on the hypergrid or not, and it will cost them absolutely nothing except the time and effort in running it. They're not going to have to pay out to third parties. So I don't really know that educators have soured on virtual worlds. I think they've just taken rational decisions to use ones they can afford and use them better. But that's my opinion. Another virtual world that's supposed to be heading on up is called Decentraland. And this is actually a VR platform that is actually powered from the word up by the blockchain. This article is in virtualitytimes.com. And basically, you can buy virtual land, create and monetize applications, content, virtual goods, and it's all powered by the Ethereum blockchain. You can read more about this at Virtual Reality Times, or one word.com. And I think it's a platform that's increasingly going to be coming into our discussions, although it's early days yet. They did manage to raise some venture capital this week, which was a very large amount of venture capital. So somebody with an economic head on them presumably has faith in them. What else can I say, really? Right, renamed Science Space. There, I told you so, didn't I? The space platform, which is made by a company called Sine Wave, has now renamed itself Science Space. So it's got a more branded, specific name. And Hypergrid Business, of course, announced the festival that I mentioned earlier. Social virtual reality startup AltSpace may not be dead after all. Oh, I told you that already. TechCrunch. Hamlet Orr, who does a Second Life blog, as it were, but does cover other things, including space for that matter, and the Sansar platform, has a post. This is nwn.blogs.com about Space Life, which is a mini multiplayer environment that's also a mini universe. And it's been created on a grid of servers actually using OpenSim, the open source. Hamlet describes OpenSim as open source spin-off of Second Life, which is not quite the case, but we'll forgive him. But this is actually quite interesting. It's a mini MMO, but it's all built. I don't know whether they're hypergrid enabled. I'd have to find out, but it's all built using OpenSim technology, even though it's marketed as an independent MO. It is apparently inspired by No Man's Sky and other open universe games, and you can jump around various different planets and go down to the surface and do whatever you want to do on the planet surfaces and things, and all powered by Open Simulator, which is good news indeed. Right. And yep, that's it from that feed. All the others are replays of our shows throughout the week, and I'll just give a quick hop over to Google Plus just to check that there is nothing there that we haven't covered, and indeed there isn't. I'm sure there should be. Oh yes, there is one here. It's a video which I sent to Google Plus. This is another promotion for high fidelity. They're actually holding a competition for people who can. The video is not loading. I think my bandwidth's up the creek today. Right, let me just put the pause button on so it doesn't blast us out. Oh, it's going. Anyway, this YouTube link points to using the spectator camera in high fidelity VR. I haven't had a chance to use this yet. I don't have a VR headset for high fidelity, though I think from what I can see of it, I could probably test it out in the desktop client. Basically, you can buy for nothing, by the way, from High Fidelity's marketplace, a spectator camera, and this actually gives you a camera Inworld that you can use to stream to YouTube and things like that straight out from High Fidelity. So it's designed to plug into things like open broadcaster software. Apparently, basically, if you're in a headset, it allows you to hold up a tablet kind of in World, and the tablet is the camera, and you can use your avatar in the 3D environment to move the camera. Obviously, on a 2D screen, it's probably more effective to just load a camera on the screen itself and move the camera around the screen. But this does sound like an attempt to bring an actual, a 360 streaming camera kind of thing into the high fidelity world that people can use and just send out to YouTube or Twitch using. They say OBS is an intermediary, but I did gather it's all configurable. It's not tied to any particular services. So I was quite keen to hear about that. So we have no specific developer news today. We will be on the air again on the hour with this week's Inworld review, and I suspect some developer news and development talk will be coming into that program too. Look at the time now. It's been quite long news. That's in about 25 minutes time. So if you're watching us live, stay tuned to this channel. And if you're watching in replay, do the usual thing. Check our replay list. So that's the news for this week. We will be back again, same time, same place next week with another news roundup. And I'll just wish you all a very good week until then. Bye for now. Yay! I think it's a good job. We didn't have a whole developer session after 35. Oh, and mind you, we started late, didn't we? So it's about 30 minutes, I guess. I think I saw